Beyond, what's up? My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm senior editor of IGN. We're here for a very special kind of video version podcast Beyond special edition, you might call it, Craig?
I'd probably shorten it down a bit.
To what?
The Last of Us Spoilercast.
Yes, very
Ladies
good.
and gentlemen, if you haven't beaten The Last of Us, what are you doing with your life, number one? Number two, turn off this video. We're going to finally talk about everything and not hold back.
Yeah.
Wait, we are?
Yeah.
Yeah. You didn't even beat it yet. So I
did.
He's only playing Survivor multiplayer.
That's what I've been doing lately.
Yeah.
But so far, everyone in the office that's played it's really enjoyed the game. I gave it a 10. Obviously, a lot of other people gave it a 10. It's a masterpiece, I think we might call it. And we're going to talk, obviously, as Greg said, about the game's story. We'll go in depth into different plot points, kind of discuss what we thought about the game. So again, shut the video off if you haven't played or beaten the game yet, or maybe if you don't care about spoilers, you haven't played the game, you still want to watch with us.
You're missing out, though.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Idiot.
Play it. So, Greg, let's start with you because you're so good looking.
Hey.
How'd you guys like that?
Thanks.
Chopped liver.
Yeah.
Good
So-
job on that diet,
each
Brian. It
other.
really paid off.
So where should we start? Should we start from the beginning, or
No.
should we start about at the end?
I say you start at the end. It's the one thing we haven't been able to talk about.
Yeah.
That's like the
Well,
funny
we haven't
thing.
been able to talk about the beginning either. To be
Ooh,
fair.
good point.
But
Good
let's start at the end.
The end, yeah. I was taken aback by that ending. I did not expect the ending to be. I finished the game, and I was texting people from Naughty Dog, calling people from Naughty Dog, and every time they'd answer, I just start saying, "I can't believe I'm the bad guy. I turned out to be the bad guy of this story," and they're
Yeah.
like, "Not really." I'm like, "F what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm the bad guy." Joel turns into the bad guy
He's
in
awful.
this game. I
He's-
couldn't believe it.
He's one of the most despicable video game heroes you will ever play. I can't think of anybody who I have,
Well-
as much as I enjoyed him, I can't think of anybody in a game I have liked less.
Well, yes and no. And I think that was the sort of moral ambiguity of the way it ended. It was sort of like, would you save this one girl to have this one girl, or would
Right.
you sacrifice her for the off chance that she could save everyone else?
There's no off chance about it, though. When you're
Yeah.
making the collectibles, they're very clear that this is it. It's working. I can't believe we finally found her.
but they don't know that until they rip her brain out of her
No, the
skull.
notes all say that this is true. That this is what's happening.
Yeah, but so this is where. So all right. So Greg and I and Goldfarb, who's not here right now, went out with a guy from Naughty Dog. We had dinner with him, or whatever. And I explained to him. He told me I was wrong about my interpretation, but my interpretation was that they didn't know that this was going to work, and that like you find video or voice recorders as you explore the hospital at the end or whatever. And it sounded to me like not specifically like they found a person who's immune to it, but they've been experimenting on people for a while,
Yes.
and that like. And I kind of gave Joel, now I'm not saying Joel's a good person necessarily, but I'm saying that it gave Joel a way out. Like, it was like.
I love that I told you this isn't true, and then Naughty Dog tells you it's not true. You're like, well, this is my interpretation. No, there's no way out. He's told in black and white. She's finally the answer. We know she's the answer. And he says, no, my needs are more important than that.
They
There's
can't
no
know
greater
that.
good.
See, this is the thing, is that they can't know that she's immune, right? Like, as far as we know, for a year's worth of time she was bitten and she didn't turn. And usually the infected
Right,
spray 2 days.
that we're certain of.
Right. But like and,
We're
and-
also he's a man, she is a female.
Well,
These
I'm
are the
saying
facts
'cause
we
they
have.
They are the last of them.
I'm saying that like she could turn at some other point in the future, and that like the cordyceps is in her brain, and we know like it's acting as it usually would, but except it's not affecting her motor skills and
Wait,
like, her functionality.
in no part was I like, oh man, it's been 2 years. She could still turn at any moment.
I'm keeping my eye on you.
Yeah, like you sleep, but you're always like, wait a minute, you never know. You could turn, because to me that was pretty rock solid. Like, she's not turning. She was immune to the virus. That's the way that works.
I want to go back to this when there's inevitably a sequel to this game, because I bet you that certainly could be one of the plot points, is that she does eventually
Really?
turn. Yeah.
I don't think so at all.
What I thought was interesting, and I was hoping they'd touch on in some way, shape, or form in the entire journey, everybody see 28 weeks later?
No.
Yes.
Remember, like, those kids, even though, and that woman, even though they were immune to the virus, they were still contagious.
Yes.
So, like, if they kissed somebody, they infected them. And not even, like,
Ellie
go crazy.
does that, right? Like, when she bites David, she tells him, you're infected.
Right.
He's like, what are you talking about? And they don't dwell on it. They do a really good job of, like, trusting you to understand what they're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do want to say, like, you can, like, it's fiction, you interpret it the way you want to interpret it. People interpret books in ways that they're not meant to be interpreted all the time. And so like my interpretation of the end of The Last of Us was like that there was a moral conundrum with obviously Joel having to weigh this decision to take Ellie away from the Fireflies, in which they might find a cure, because there's no guarantee that they're going to find a cure. There's no guarantee. They have her on a surgical table. They're definitely going to be able to get a cure from her because she's immune to it. Like there's no guarantee.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I didn't get that. Like,
Yeah, me
he picked
neither.
up a couple micro recorders and they were like, I hope this works. And it's like, oh yeah, we solved it. Until they peeled her head open and cut her brain out, and we're like, oh yeah, it did it. They wouldn't know. There's no way of knowing until she's dead.
Here-
And he didn't want to take that chance
Putting all the-
because he's a selfish prick.
Putting that
Yeah,
whole,
I mean, that's
that
kind of
whole
the way-
thread away. Like when they're making the walk up, he asks her if she's up for this or whatever, and she's like, "Yeah," you know what I mean? Like they don't have the dead solid conversation of what if this kills you? What if you have to give your life for this? What blah blah blah.
Well,
but
'cause
she
he
says
never-
she's going forward with this.
Yeah, well, it's because that never comes up as a concept, right? Like Joel.
You'd think it would.
Joel is sucker punched into when he finds out like what you're
He
gonna
says
kill
like,
her?
oh, they're probably going to take some blood. That's what he says. He's like, oh, they're going to take some blood. It'll be fine. She's like, I've been pricked before. That's what she says. She doesn't go, I've had my brain removed from my head before.
Right. But what
So-
what I was kind of hoping too is that you'd steal her away and kill all these people, and on the drive home she's like, "What happened?" And like, "Oh no, it didn't work." And she's like, "I told them to do this to me." Like, what? Couldn't there have been a conversation? Like, the problem. This is one of the weird parts of the ending with the story. I think is that all of a sudden when we're playing as Joel, the Fireflies turn this corner and are now evil. Everyone in the hospital is evil. They're going to kill you. They're going to kill her without letting you talk to her. It seems like we could have had one scene where Joel goes and has a conversation with Ellie.
Well, yeah,
is this what you want?
it kind of reminded me
and
like-
then it's like, it's fucking on right now, rather than it's just like,
See, and
kill everybody.
But I loved that they didn't do that because in reality, like this isn't necessarily your story and your relationship with Ellie. This is Joel's relationship and Joel's
Sure.
story.
Yeah.
And he's making the executive decision that they're wrong, whether or not they are. Like
Yes,
he's
but
making
you,
the call.
but you get to make
Humanity
some of
is
those
not worth
decisions
saving.
yourself. Like when I kicked in that door and there was those 3 doctors sitting there like, oh God, I was like, you die! And I shot one right in the head. Because me, I was like, don't you hurt that girl! And I shot him in the head. And he was like, oh, I just work here.
That whole part is actually, I thought, a great analogy to how the clickers and the runners work, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that they talked about at the debut that their humanity is still in there, and that's why they're like this, because they're trying to fight the infection that's inside of them and fucking with them. And so like when I do that, I was like, where's the option? Where's the choice? I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And so like I was like, I'm waiting for something to happen, and the doctor comes at me with a scalpel like,
You're like, no!
and I'm like, well, now I gotta kill everybody.
And then you busted out
I
your
didn't- I didn't kill the-
flamethrower
I didn't kill the
because
other
Joel
two.
has one.
Yeah, I only
I
killed
didn't want no
one.
witnesses.
The first guy who happened to be in that door, I was like, you're dead.
the
There wasn't any
nurses-
witnesses.
the
You killed
nurses lived.
you killed like 40 people on the way up to that room. I think
Yeah.
there's,
Oh, yeah,
like,
yeah.
quite a few witnesses. But yeah, I mean, my whole interpretation of it was yeah, like, she could be the cure. They got to work on it. We're talking about a post-apocalyptic society where like a lot of technology's gone, like a lot of the knowledge and know-how, frankly, is gone. Like these guys.
It's not that bad. You just hit triangle on the generator 3 times.
Yeah,
and power the
and
whole
it's all good.
hospital.
It's just like I don't think they went into it too much, but like to say like that Ellie, they are guaranteed to get a cure because Ellie is immune is ridiculous, and that's why I think that Joel's like, this isn't something that's certain. They have been. The Fireflies have had this hospital in Salt Lake City for a long time. Like they might not have found someone that was immune, but they've probably been experimenting on other people. It kind of gave him a way out. I'm not saying he's a good person. I'm not saying he made the right choice for humanity, but it gave himself a little bit of
Well, I
humanity.
mean,
by
for me
saving
too,
her.
even putting that whole thread aside, he cements himself as a bad guy when he lies to Ellie at the end.
I mean, he
for
cements
me,
himself way before that. But
for
yes.
me, that's like
Yeah.
that's the Anakin to Vader moment.
Yeah.
Of like, all right, I've done all this for you. I've done all this horrible stuff, but whatever. And then you get there and you lie to the one person you're trying to save.
Not
Like, you
only
are
do you, but she was
dirtbag.
like, now here's your chance. Was all of that true? And
Exactly.
you're like, yep, all true. I'm a
and that's-
liar.
Let's go play in the dam.
And because of that, like I feel like Ellie,
But no
to some-
swimming.
to some degree, Ellie is complicit in the lie. I feel like she trusts Joel, but at the same time suspects that he's kind of not being entirely open with her about it. So she gives him that opportunity to say, like, I trust you, and whatever you say
because
is
it's
what
all
I'm gonna
it's
believe.
like being in a relationship. It's like that's all you have. Is if you
Yes.
look at this person that you trust and you're like, if there's anything else you want to tell me, now's the time. And you're
Yeah.
like, no, everything's fine.
Yep. Totally.
And then you're not. She's not complicit in that. She's just. It's literally that's the only thing she has is this guy.
Yep.
That's it. That and the off chance that she'll see a giraffe.
So
Beautiful
like,
moment again.
so the,
Oh, really was.
I cried like a baby.
too.
Really?
Yes, that was the moment that broke me. Was the
wow.
giraffes?
I started tearing up 20 minutes before the ending. So when I busted in and shot that doctor, I was like, "Oh, dude!" I actually had tears rolling down my face.
And by the way, before we jump away or whatever, there's also that really pivotal scene where there's a lot of cutscenes in the game where Joel's you see people die, and Joel's sometimes killing them, and he does what I didn't think he was going to do to at least set it up for a more straighthtforward sequel. As he kills Marlene.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's such a great move.
And
no, you'll just tell somebody.
Not how I thought that scene was going to go down.
It was awesome in its brutality. The Naughty Dog doesn't shy away from like showing you these kinds of things, and it did cement Joel as being like very selfish. But he's doing it for this girl. Like when I was playing it and beating it, I was like, I'm not mad at Joel. Like I actually don't dislike Joel because he made the righteous choice for him, and you can kind of understand where he's coming from because he's been on this adventure with this girl who, by the way, saved his life. And was in like quite a predicament with David, which we'll get into a little later and stuff like that. But I think that the contrast with how the game starts, where you really see a more normal pre-apocalyptic humanity of Joel walking into his house in the beginning of the game. He's on the phone. He's trying to get a new job. He might be a contractor or something like that, a construction worker of some sort. He's worrying about bills and stuff like that. His daughter Sarah's laying on the couch. And what I really liked about it was that it's a very direct and obvious allusion to his relationship with Ellie.
Yeah.
It wasn't like abstract at all. And that's what I really enjoyed about it. So what did you think about the way the game opened? Which I think is this game's young Drake moment.
Right, you talk about that a lot from Uncharted 3. If you're not catching up, if you didn't play Uncharted 3, you suck. But in Uncharted 3, we thought we knew a lot about the game, but when we started playing it, like Chapter 2 jumps to Drake as a kid. We're like, holy, I didn't see this coming. Yeah. It was the same way. Yeah, like we had talked about it coming up. We weren't sure how much of the world before we'd get to see, and I kind of expected it to be one rolling montage cutscene of people running and that fire, and like that was kind of the outbreak. But to get to play from that perspective as his daughter, for need to do all these different things and see. I thought it was brilliant, and it really caught me off guard, and I liked setting up the world that way beforehand.
The way they handle it, too, is really great, because you open and you play as Sarah, and you're walking around the house, and you are this defenseless child. You obviously have nothing to worry about, but it's a little eerie, and you know what's coming if you know anything about this game.
If you've looked at the box art,
yeah, you get the idea
you
that
can
some
guess
shit's about to go down.
That this girl will be dead within 5 minutes.
Yeah, so you're walking around, and you have the monsters in the closet moment of like, what's going on in here? And it's fine, you go downstairs, the monster's there. And then when the tables turn and you play as Joel, you're similarly defenseless because you have to carry her. And it's just, I thought that was like a really interesting setup to give you two completely powerless people who care about each other right off the bat, and to have one of them be taken away.
Yeah, and the polish in the beginning I think is really cool too, because when you take control of Sarah after, well, first of all, Sarah gives him the watch. And the watch is really cool because I kept looking at it throughout the game. Like, it's still there.
So does he. There are moments where he will just have his arms crossed and just look down, and you know that it's like, Dad, you're thinking about that kid.
It's all f***ed up, and I didn't make this connection until later, but at one point, Ellie says, like, your watch is broken, or something like that. Yeah. And it's I think another allusion back to a joke that Sarah, like an undeveloped joke that Sarah and Joel had with each other, because he thinks that, like, he's like, the watch is broken in the beginning, and he tricks her. It must have been something that was developed in their relationship long before we got to know them or whatever, so that was kind of another cue in with like his daughter and then like his new daughter, basically.
But it cuts deep with him, right? Because like she says it to be kind of a bitch because she doesn't like him at that time. Like Ellie is saying that in a really catty way, like, your watch is broken. Like, sort out your life. Your stuff is broken. And like that sucks for Joel because he's thinking back to that moment that we're thinking of.
Yeah, for sure. And then I loved exploring the house in the beginning too. Like you see the birthday card she forgot to give him. You walk into the bathroom, you see a newspaper that's kind of talking about this spreading virus at the time. They don't know about it. The one thing I really love the most, I think, is like when you walk into Joel's bedroom and the TV's on and you're watching the newscast and an explosion happens, and then the explosion happens at the same time out the window.
That
like
was so cool.
Yeah, like little things like that are really cool. And you run down the stairs and the cop cars are going right by.
Your phone is going off. You missed the call from Tom.
Yeah. Tommy's blowing up.
The game had a few moments like that too, where you're sort of like following along this window and you can't see through it until you're actually in the right spot. Like with the scene, we'll get to it, but the scene with the giraffes was almost sort of similar, where they're like, "Hey, come and look at this," and you're running around. You're like, "I can't." Everything's all fogged out, and there's a crack in the window, and finally it opens up, and you see everything. And the same thing happened with the house, where it's telling you the story in these like slivers. And you're like, you get a tiny glimpse of it. There's an explosion out the window. There's something on the news. The news gets cut off. A cop car goes by. You hear a crash. You hear a dog barking outside, and then it stops. And you're like, what's going on? And then the neighbor busts in, and you're like, okay, it's fucked up. Yeah, I should have read that paper on the toilet a little bit.
It's really like the whole scene where the neighbor busts in is really cool too, because it's obviously your first sign of the infected. Specifically, he's a runner, and I don't think anyone at that point would be a clicker yet. And that's immediately when Joel starts to lose his humanity. And even though we get to see him 2 decades later, and that's a huge jump from like the events when he lost his daughter. So it's like that's an exorbitant amount of time.
Which is great, because that means they don't do what most movies and stuff do, where the first thing that happens, where it's like 20 years later, he's like moping about his daughter. Somebody brings it up because we just saw it as the viewer, right? It's like, no, it's like life goes on. He's not necessarily over it, but some shit has happened. He has other things to worry about, and he is just in a new phase.
Yeah, and I guess I didn't realize until the one scene in the school where you see the banner that's like, prom 2013, and it's all hanging. I was like, oh, shit, it's 2033, and 20 years has passed since this year, which I was kind of thrown off because half the people in the houses had nice TVs, but half of them had those really fat ones.
You'd be surprised how many people still have fat TVs.
well.
Sucks. I just saw one thrown away on the street today. I'm like, what year is it?
That's a guy that was making the right decision.
He's upgrading. Welcome to the future, pal.
Yeah, exactly.
So obviously at that point we are, like Mitch had alluded to, we're running through the street. We're with Tommy, Joel's brother, in some sort of Jeep. It's cool. You get the controller and kind of look around and see what's going on. You pass a couple with their kid on the street. They don't stop to help them. You see like one of their friends' farms burning down. There's an accident obviously in town. Then they're running around. We get to this really cool part where I actually experimented with it a little bit, and you can die in these parts.
Oh yeah, I noticed that on my second. I started my second playthrough, and I was like, I've spent in the back seat of the car. I was looking to the left in the back. Now I'm going to look to the right in the back and the front. And you can start moving around. And yeah, if you sort of like dilly dally a little bit, you get torn up. Like bad things happen to you in those first few minutes. And I guess the first time I played, I just ran from point A to point B and got through it. But if you're just like, hey, what's that? It's like, oh.
Yeah, it happened to me too. Specifically when I was running towards where the soldier is that kills Sarah. You can hear the guy behind you, and you're really not meant to see him. If you turn around to look at him, he gets you. So like,
yeah.
But I had to turn around and look at him. Mm-hmm. So we get to this scene with the reluctant soldier. Tommy comes and saves the day, but it's too late for Sarah. She's shot and killed.
Yeah.
And then on that wonderful and uplifting note, the game proper, I would say, begins.
Right.
At which point we're fast forwarded to Boston 20 years later, and one of what we find out is one of the very few remaining quarantine zones that are functioning. We see quarantine zones later in the game that have been overrun.
Yeah.
Did you try to with the military police?
Yeah, they push you down.
They push you down. They're like, I will kill you if you do that again. I was
really?
Like, will you? And he pushed me down. And he popped me in the face, and I died. And it's like there's no game here yet. Like you're walking in the road, and that guy's like, I will kill you. Back down, and he will.
Yeah, it's awesome. So like this is where we meet Tess. I think Tess is really one of the coolest characters.
One of my favorites
in the game. So what do you guys make of Tess and their relationship?
I just love that Tess was as strong, if not stronger, than Joel. Like she was way tougher than him. She clearly had like a better lay of the land. She was very much in control of whatever their business was. Like she in the beginning, like she just comes back from finishing a job because Joel was being lazy or whatever.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you say that 20 years later you don't catch up with Joel, and he's like, oh man, my daughter. But he's clearly just checked out in many ways.
Like he did not want to go out. He was.
And
still...
Tess is like, we got to go do this stuff, and he's like, I guess, but my daughter's still dead.
Yep.
And he's up about it.
But
or
I love
about something.
He has like the alcoholic mentality, right? Where he's like, oh, I'm so sad, I don't want to do anything or whatever. And he behaves that way. But I love that there's a perfect nod to that in the beginning where Tess is like, do you want one? And she pulls out the whiskey and he goes, no, I don't want one. I don't want that. Mm-hmm. But he's behaving in a similar fashion to an alcoholic who would be like drinking his sorrows away.
Now, were they
if I was him, I'd be like, yes, please.
Yes.
That's one of 10 left on Earth.
Were they a couple, or were they just a work couple?
They used to be a couple for sure. Mm-hmm. Like they were definitely together at some point.
I went back and forth on how I felt about what they were doing at the moment.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if they were like still a thing or whatever, but there definitely
There's
was
been
a romantic relationship
penetration at some point.
Jesus. Yeah, I agree. I think that they probably were in a relationship at one point, or maybe still were, and we just don't get. I mean, this world is very different.
Yeah.
The way they act is very different. They also have a business relationship that is not just like a convenience for them. Like they need to make it work, and so they probably don't let their personal relationship get involved in that kind of stuff. They're dealing with things like ration cards, arms, and ammunition. So.
Well, the quarantine zone, it doesn't seem like that's... I doubt their relationship, personal and romantic-wise, was anything like Tommy and his wife, right? That
Where they were, like, married and before
because they were out, they were out on their own, doing their own thing, having this community, where here it's a very structured, like 1984 kind of thing with Big Brother I was watching. I bet it was always more just like, they're both lonely, pretty much.
Sure.
One of those things.
Yeah, Tommy and his wife had enough freedom to bicker like a real married couple.
Right.
Like,
that's how you know you're free.
Yeah, where they're just like, oh, it, you take the horse. No, I don't want it, and they're yelling at each other. Like, there's no one like, don't do that with a gun.
The other cool thing I think about Boston that we see that's kind of subdued, there's two things I think that are really interesting. One is that Joel has a lot of respect from everyone in that town. Like, they respect him, and it's probably because he's getting them things they need without the military knowing. the way they talk to him. I don't know if you got to the point where if you actually go up to a guy like you don't have to have this conversation, he starts to talk shit to you, and one of the guys is like, "Are you fucking crazy?" Like that's Joel. Like,
I didn't see that. That's awesome.
And yeah, it's like in the corner by like before you go out the gate, and the guy apologizes to you or whatever. And there's another part, and just looking at the cityscape, it's clear that the Fireflies had infiltrated that city at one point, and that there was a fight there because there's their tags and spray paint are everywhere.
There was a fight everywhere in that game. There was nowhere in that game where it just like got
this is
old.
pristine.
Yeah, like it wasn't like close the door on this one. No one's ever going in there. Everywhere was destroyed. Like there wasn't a single part of the game where it wasn't someone like, I really hate that poster and they ripped it down.
No, I'm not saying
Let's drive a car through this. Like everything was burned at one point.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the
Garbage
quarantine
everywhere.
zone still exists, right? The Fedra, the remains of the federal government, are still holding Boston. They're not holding a lot of other places, but they didn't hold it in perpetuity. Like there was at one time the Fireflies that occupy the city, and I thought that was kind of cool. And that story was just told by the spray paint on the walls, which I thought was really neat. And then the Fireflies basically have some sort of terrorist attack outside.
Actually, I really like that too because every video game does that now, right? Where they put stupid
Visual
hokey
storytelling.
messages on the they just spray paint all over the walls. And in The Last of Us, I actually stopped to read it because it wasn't just like beware. It was like, oh shit, something
Something
dark
happened
Something
here.
specifically bad happened.
Well,
here.
and you get a lot of that if you're going through the homes and you're like not only rummaging through their shit, but paying attention to the spaces around you. Like there's a lot that shows you like, oh man, like this space was lived in, and this is the way they took out of their home. Like you can see where like this is where they gave up packing their shit.
And that's
just
what I really
Right,
appreciated
right.
about the game was, and we talked about like meandering and how some of us spent more time kind of like roaming around and others didn't. And the game wasn't always completely direct. There's no button like in BioShock or whatever. You hit it and there's a
Where
big
do I
arrow on
go?
the floor. That never happens in the game. You don't know where to go next most times.
Yeah.
So it's just up to you to kind of just be like, I guess over there looks okay. So if you figure out the path straight through, good for you. But if you don't, like, there is detail everywhere. You walk into people's houses and you're like, this is a kid's bedroom.
Yeah.
Something horrible happened here.
And a lot of the time, like characters will address the situation around you. Like there's a point where you're with Sam and Henry and Ellie, and you walk outside. There's a swing set in the backyard, and they talk about it. Like Ellie and Sam are like, "What is this?"
Yeah.
And they just like they start pointing and talking about different things that they don't understand, or they address like, "Oh, there was like dogs here," or
Right.
something. Like they address the fact that you are in a place. They
The
don't just,
environmental storytelling
Yeah.
is what's so spectacular in
Yeah.
the game, I think. I mean, on top of everything else. But when you are walking through and like you find clothes everywhere, and you asked me before we started if I cried during the game, right? And I got choked up twice. The first time being with Sarah in the very beginning, and the second time when I was exploring a house and I found a little boy's journal. And I'm reading through all the entries, and it's as the outbreak's happening, and it's getting worse and everything else.
Oh, yeah, I
and then
found
the
that too.
second to last journal entry is that the dad drove him and his dog to the edge of town, and they released the dog into the woods.
Yeah.
And he's like, and then they're driving away, and the dad's like, you know, he wants to be wild. This is how he wants it. And it never happened before. I paused the game and hugged Portillo, my dog, who was next to me, because it was just like one of those like.
Portillo wants to be wild too, Greg.
It was one of those moments of just like how f***ed up it had gotten. You know what I mean? Like obviously there's monsters outside and this, that, and the other, but like they have to have these kind of decisions.
And that's what I loved about the game too. There were pockets of that everywhere. Like there's the story over here on the beach of the guy that was like, I'm gonna spend as much time in the water as I can. Shit, I have to turn around. There's
Ishmael.
nothing. Then,
Ish.
yeah.
Ish.
Then there's like, hey, we're gonna start a school in a sewer.
See, and like that
That'll be safe.
That was what was so awesome about Ish's story, is that the fact that all of that connected to
Yeah.
it, and it led you from his boat into the sewer and then out
Yeah.
into the world again.
Yeah.
And there was just like, wow.
Yeah,
like,
I love that thread. The other cool thread that it's not a thread, it's just a very specific thing that happened. I'm not sure where it was. I think it was in Pittsburgh. Was you walk into a house and it said someone spray painted Rachel on the wall. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's
Yeah.
just an arrow down.
Yeah.
And it has like
a note.
Yeah, it's like a note to her, and Ellie, in one of the many contextual conversations they have, is like, I wonder if they ever found each other. And
Yeah.
I was like, it's just really cool that they are constantly commenting on the things they find. It's not just like this
Yeah.
thing that's like immersive where it's like, I'm going to find a piece of intel so I can get a trophy.
Right.
It's
Like
like,
Ish's story when they leave the sewer and there's a sign outside that says, "Don't go in
Yeah,
there."
on the other
Like,
side.
after it's
You
hell.
guy.
And she's like, "Come on, couldn't have said that on the way in."
it's awesome. So,
quick prediction.
oh,
Do you think, we know that DLC's coming for single player.
Yeah.
Do you think it might be Ish's story?
I don't know.
hope so.
They went through so much to set it up.
Yeah, I really hope so.
And then, now, granted, the narrative's told. I already know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I hope not. I would like to see more of what happened before Joel.
I have a conspiracy theory about what that DLC is, because there was a ton of concept art for San Francisco in the.
Oh,
in
good
the
point.
book.
Yeah, I remember that.
They also prototyped or worked on a bunch of stuff with a dog ally. So I'm wondering if like you play
Then
somebody.
they heard Call of Duty was doing that.
Yeah.
Damn it!
So I'm curious if like there is going to be remnants of the dog companion in the DLC. If it's going to be San Francisco, if it'll be
Remnants
somewhere
of the dog, like
like
pieces of
yeah,
it?
like the leg.
Fungus dog.
Me and my lucky dog leg. Let's survive the apocalypse.
Because we saw like the East Coast coming through Central America, the middle of the states.
Yeah.
But we didn't see any West Coast stuff, so I would kind of like to see another part of the country.
Yeah, the San Francisco art that you're specifically talking about was like one of the first pieces of art we ever saw from the game,
Yeah.
and that was what led us to believe that some part of the game would take place in San
Yeah,
Francisco.
which obviously did
See,
not
and
happen.
you say you
No,
wanna
but
see
I
stuff.
see what you're saying. It could be from Colorado down, like a boom
Right,
through
like I wonder if they
San
went
Francisco to
yeah,
Utah.
Exactly.
Did they imply that this is happening all over the world?
It wasn't really clear.
It must be. I mean, it's similar to. Well, I hate to use this reference because we always refer to it, but it reminds me of Jericho in the sense that like the rest of the world is functioning during Jericho, and like you know that they're there because they're constantly like trying to communicate with you with
Right,
like
sure.
drops and like trying to give you generators and food and stuff like that. You assume that because something like this is airborne and with spores, or whatever, that the entire world is essentially infected.
See, because I don't want to see stuff leading up. I read your review, and there was a part in it where you said you're sort of just dropped in. You don't hear all the backstory come up to this, and that's great for that. And I think that was really cool of them to not be like in 1885 and it's black and white
And it's spelling it all out for
and
you.
it's like 12 people died and you're just like, no, I found a newspaper in the bathroom, my daughter died, 20 years passed, it, let's do this. Like, I like that.
Yeah.
I don't want DLC to tell me. It's like I didn't need episode 1 for Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like I don't need
Sure.
DLC for all that stuff. I think just like drop me in right where it was, keep it going, tell me other stories happening around the time, around the country, or around the world, but I don't need to know 10 years ago someone's like, are you itchy? I don't know. Blah.
Yeah, I mean, this is where the reference, and I think some people that read the book got it, and other people, didn't get it because they didn't read the book. But this is really an analog for Cormac McCarthy's The Road,
Right.
And specifically the fact that they never say what happened. And in the movie of The Road, I've heard, I didn't watch the movie, I was a fan of the book or whatever, but that they kind of refer that it was like kind of a natural disaster that happened and like ruined the world. But in the book, they really don't say anything.
they just
right?
say the world is ash, and that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the world is f***ed and it's over, and this is the story of a man and his son.
Yeah.
And like that is basically the way they go to The Last of Us, except for that little scene in the beginning with Sarah, and then you're just like, this is a story of a man and this girl.
Right, and there was more similarities to the Road. There was the whole basically head-on fact that there were cannibals now, and The Road did it. Like they were like, "Come on over, we're having dinner," and they're like,
Want to
"Oh,
slay baby?"
what's in that monster closet down there?" And all these naked people are like, "Get us out of here!" And they did it in The Last of Us, where it was just this guy was just like chopping up parts. And he's like, "What are you doing with that?" Nothing. And then it's like, "Ellie, you hungry? What's that, deer? Are you sure? Yeah, it. I guess I'll eat that." And then there's
He
like
promised.
5, yeah. Oh yeah, of course. And then there's like 5 naked people hanging upside down
Yeah.
in the butcher's thing, and it's like, oh, they are eating them. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it showed that whole that desperation side of things. It always gets to that. That there's like these bad things happen, then it's like how fast does humanity either A, start killing each other, B, start raping each other, or C, start eating each other. And 2 out of 3 of those things either happened or were heavily implied. And the rape thing, you and I actually talked about the other day on one of our many lunch talks about rape.
Lunch dates.
Is that they never really until the very end of the game where they're like, she's gonna get, you're gonna bring her out there, she's gonna get raped or murdered or whatever. They never actually imply that could happen to somebody or to Ellie specifically. And when she's pinned down in that
David.
by David in that Elks Lodge or whatever, and it's burning down that restaurant. I sort of was just like, oh, this is implied. He's going to rape her, but it's never.
Or not even that he's going to, but just that he could, right? Like, because it's like, here's this man overpowering this little girl, and it's like that is uncomfortable enough. He doesn't have to say like, I'm gonna rape you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the other part, because that is like it is like the unspoken underlying, like, one of the reasons you protect Ellie is because these people are f***ing crazy.
Yeah.
Well,
and
the first thing that happens in that game is Tess gets jumped and has to defend herself.
Right.
Whether that's because she's a woman or because she's this business person with weapons.
Right, and like the first part you see it is not even with David. It's like when you are basically driving through Pittsburgh and they trap you. It's one of the scenes you see in one of the cutscenes they showed long before the game came out. And the car crashes over, and that guy has is grabbing Ellie. Like he goes for Ellie first, and has his hands all over and stuff. And that's like oh, we got to protect Ellie. It's like really one of the things that it's so much more important for you almost to protect her in those kinds of scenes because she can take care of herself in straight up combat because she proves it time and time again. I mean, she proves it when she stabs the Fedra guy in the leg and they end up killing those soldiers when they're almost captured or whatever. So there's like something, the unspoken like danger that Ellie has to go through just as a woman in this world, I think, is like really one of the most palpable and unspoken things.
I know there was a lot of talked about the whole like you will protect her line with Lara in Tomb Raider and stuff like that, and for justifiably she was a grown woman with weapons, like to protect her. But in The Last of Us, you really do feel that because A, she's a young girl, and B, because there's men out there, and as men, we know men are monsters. And like in the apocalypse, they're even worse. They're just like I would like if I saw a wolf in the wild in that game, I wasn't worried. But I saw some guy like, I was like, oh, I'm gonna fucking kill everything about you.
Yeah, kill or be killed, and that's one of the like that whole mantra is one of the things that Ellie and Joel conflict about when Ellie basically saves Joel's life, and Joel refuses to even acknowledge it until later on when he's like, it was me or him. And that is basically the whole underlying message, I think, in the entire game is like, Joel is a murderer, much like Drake is a murderer in the Uncharted games, but that's like a comedic, almost action movie. Like, this is serious. Like, that's what I said in the review was every human body has weight to it when you're killing it. Like, you don't really feel bad about killing the infected, even though that they're human.
No one in Uncharted ever goes, please, 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 don't kill me, man, please. That never happens. Yeah. But this happens all the time in The Last of Us.
You're going to execute somebody and you can see their eyes widen.
You feel justified.
And they go like this, and then they like shrivel back and like, oh my God. But then you give it a minute, and they're like, I'm going to fucking shit.
Exactly.
I got to kill you right now. Like
when Joel, stabs the dude in the kneecap, he marks the map, and then he walks over, and he's like, he told you what you want. And he's like, I know, and I believe him. And it was like, it was like an applaud moment for me of like, yes, this guy, we're on a mission. But then you jump ahead to where I'm like, why am I the bad guy? Why
and that's what I really, and I don't know, it's hard to say enjoyed, but that's what I really sort of got most from The Last of Us was that it gave me this grimy, dirty feeling like no game ever had. Whereas desperate and you're crawling around and scrounging for scraps to put together to kill people to survive, to make it 5 more feet in the snow, in the rain, in the sleet, like just to make it another second. And it took me a few hours to really realize that that's what the game was about. Because it's not just run around and kill people. It's like every single thing you do counts. And it's all weighing on you. And the world is gritty and disgusting. And it's gross and horrible and morose. And you're just like, oh, this is what they want me to feel. They want me to feel like really just defined by how dirty of a human being I've become.
Everything about it is meant to make you feel bad.
Yes.
You're hitting on a good point there of like, it's, designed to make you feel something and, define that character a certain way. Even though I was like, I can't believe Joel's the bad guy at the end of this, I didn't feel betrayed by the character. I didn't feel like I wasn't like Mass Effect, like, where's my real ending, Naughty Dog? You know what I mean? Like, I was like, everything makes sense. It's a weird thing of like, I feel like playing this game was more like reading an awesome book than any other game I have. In a game, you expect a happy ending and your character to come out on top or something else, and sometimes it's weird when in the end. This one was totally like, this was their narrative and this was their vision and this was their thing.
I loved it for that. I loved them for not copping out and going like, do you want to go left or right? And everyone was like, did you get the good or the bad ending? It's like, no, we created a narrative for you and you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, and you all got the bad ending.
On Up at Noon, Neil and Bruce were on during E3, and they were talking about that. This ending was a horrible focus test. Nobody liked it. Other designers on the team came up to them and were like, we need to change this ending. And they're like, no. We're like, well, this is what we are, and this is what we're doing. And that's crazy.
And it's interesting to me that you say Joel's the bad guy, because he is, but in that world, he's like the 10th worst guy.
Well,
he could be like, yo, at least I didn't f***ing eat anybody.
Exactly. And we touched on David, and like, when Ellie kills him, she gets up and she hugs Joel and says, he was gonna, and he's like, I know, and she never finishes that. And a bunch of people tweeted me and like, did that mean rape? Like, I didn't feel that way, blah, blah, blah. But I got to talk to Nolan North when he was in for Up at Noon, and if IGN's working, this video is up on Friday. The Nolan North interview is up on Thursday. You can watch it yourself. But talking to him, I hadn't played the game yet.
Right.
And I was like, tell me about this character, David. He's like, David isn't a bad guy. He doesn't think he's a bad guy. He's out to protect his group. And Nolan North's like, and when he tried to rape Ellie, it was because, he's trying to, she's can't be infected, and this, that, and the other, and blah, blah. Like, he had justifications for where he was coming at the character. Right. But Nolan North talking about it, I thought I was going to get some real heavy as far as like, there'd be like, weird things going on that it was pretty clear this is going to be rape. Whereas at the end, they leave it up to your mind, like your own worst conclusion. Like, where were you going to draw?
That's the thing with David is like you meet him and you're cautious, obviously, and Ellie's like, I don't know what, and by your, I mean Ellie or you.
Yeah.
But then you're playing as her for the first time, and you're just sort of like, oh, I'm doing everything Joel was doing, but smaller. And you meet him, and you're like, something's off, but then you guys fight together and you make it through.
He has a gun. He never pulled on you. You're protecting each other.
He tells his friend to go off and get the antibiotics. You're like, all right. But part of you is always like everything in this game. You're always waiting for that other shoe to drop.
Well, they've drilled the paranoia into you so
Yes.
aggressively the whole time that you can't help it. Like, even if you wanted to trust him, and he was totally trustable, if he wasn't a cannibal psychopath, you would still be thinking like something.
And it was, just like The Road, spoilers for The Road, but towards the end of
The Road is like 10 years old. So.
but towards the end of it, the father dies, the kid's on his own, and he sees a family of people walking down the street, and he's like, I guess I'll join them. And they're like, come on, just come with us. It's safe. And he doesn't know if he's going to have an apple in his mouth,
and you don't
dead
even,
and eaten an hour later,
yeah, and you don't even really know.
He's got a new dad.
That's the beauty of that book too, is you don't really know what happens to him.
Yeah.
And
in the book, he doesn't even see the family. He's just like, and he takes off and he just walks away alone.
And the interesting thing is that, where this diverges from The Road specifically is that The Road has this really interesting part in the middle of the book where they find that bunker full of like food and clothes and like a shower and beds and stuff like that. It's like one of those things where it's like Cormac McCarthy's like, here's a little bit of a reprieve for you for like 20 pages.
They're enjoying
and you
the
can
shower
just chill
for the
out and then
first
get the
time.
back out into the apocalypse.
The kids
Now,
got so
now
mad.
The Last of Us had that, but it was with giraffes.
Yeah, and
That was the one moment where it was like, we're not in a bunker full of food because pressing X to eat for 3 hours would have been boring.
Yeah.
But you're walking along, and it's right after. It was really
It's
cool
right
'cause
after the David
It's
stuff.
like the 40th time in the game where you're like, come on, I'll boost you up. And Joel puts his hands out, and no one shows up. And he's like, Ellie, what's going
Everything
on?
about that scene is masterful.
And
right?
he looks
Like,
over, and she's not there. And it's just like, this repetitive nature of gameplay all of a sudden just ends. It's hit X to jump up. You don't have to do that. You look around, and she's gone. And you're like, you all right? And she's like, what? Yeah, because it's obviously she's catching up to everything that happened. To
Yeah,
her.
she's still totally like
still
that.
processing
That
it.
whole David thing left such a thumbprint on her.
Yep.
Taking that,
You
killing.
boost her up, and then she runs away, and she's like, "Oh my god!" And you're like, "What?" And you scramble up as fast as you can. And you're running along to catch a glimpse. You're chasing her down this hallway, and everything opens up, and you sit at the side of a giraffe, and then you see one, and it's this very Jurassic Park moment where it's just like we've been
its
running
head.
from monsters for so long, but now we can pet it.
Yeah.
So you can
See,
go up
that's what broke me. Like, that is when I like just playing it. I was like, oh shit! Suddenly I'm crying, and I didn't even realize it. Because what's happened is you've come off such this incredible low of Ellie just like obliterating this dude's face with a machete.
Yeah.
And you start the next scene in spring, where you're on the highway and she's just staring straight ahead at this painting or this mural of a deer, and you're like, shit! Like, she's thinking back to winter because that's where it all started, was over a deer. And the entire time on the lead up to the draft, she's despondent. She's not paying attention to you. Something's clearly up. Joel, for the first time in the game, is like being really nice and friendly and like kind of jovial. And you're like, who is this guy? Like, their roles have shifted. And to finally go up there and see something that is just beautiful and joyous.
What I
and
loved
wonderful
about that was
broke me.
it was a reminder that the world is not destroyed, just humanity. Is. And it's just society is in crumbled ruin, but giraffes are like, oh, we're
giraffes.
We
we're
weren't
good.
here for that.
We own this.
That's fine.
It's our
We're-
city now.
I think I probably
But then
watched
I did get a little worried because you see like 5 giraffes walk off in one direction, and then right over here is that the world's scariest monster tunnel in the whole game, where there's just like bloaters and 85 to like and giraffes are just like, oh, we're just gonna cut through here, it'll be fun. Oh my god! But you don't know if I don't know if the infected are eating animals in that game. Like maybe they are. Like there's stuff with the dogs. There's the monkeys you see for a few minutes. I thought it was gonna be a whole thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like crazy
Zombie
psycho
monkey.
infected.
Yeah, I
monkeys.
was really relieved actually when that didn't happen. But like
Me
a
too.
lot of this, obviously all the places you go to topographically show how quickly nature reclaims what it's basically owns already when humans have disappeared for 20 years. And this is something that's been kind of imprinted in us lately with like those History Channel shows where it's like, what does New York City look like after 10 years? If there
Life
are no
after people. Yeah.
And it's like they really did a nice job of capturing that, I thought. But I also like that one of the coolest parts of the game I thought was kind of a subdued part of the game where they're going after Robert towards the beginning of the game and they go to that settlement and you start to see the economy of the people that are outside of the quarantine zones. I don't know if you guys explored that little town.
Yeah.
area where like the guy's selling rats like to eat.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
another
they have
dude
them on
is
skewers.
Yeah, another dude is like selling dogs, and you
Yeah.
go up to him and he's like, all these dogs are spoken for. Like, come back next week.
And you can
whatever.
hear people like, "Oh my God, you have rats! Like, give
Yeah.
me one!" Like they're excited to eat a rat.
I like
it's-
that
it's
he's like, come back next week, so we'll have new dogs. Like, that's not really how the apocalypse works.
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe-
or how dogs work.
Maybe he's getting, who knows? And they have like a Fight Club kind of thing going on where they're taking bets on
Yeah.
fights, whatever. And this is also the scene where you really start to see how crazy and badass Tess is, because Tess confronts that guy who's like one of the bodyguards, shoots him right in his face. This is the first time you get into combat in the game, and it's cool because it teaches you, even though you know everything about this game is being very sneaky and very stealthy, and you're making things, whatever, it teaches you gunplay first. And I think that is actually kind of cool. Was that like, we'll teach you how to use the guns first, and by the way, this isn't really that important, you know, because you're not going to be using them that much if you're
I
playing.
mean,
the
Naughty
games,
Dog
but-
is fantastic at that, though. Like with Uncharted 3, like you're at a bar and
Fist
something
fight
breaks
first.
out, and all of a
Right.
sudden I'm learning combat, but I'm in a cutscene, and they're really, really good with stuff like that. So I really appreciated that with this game too, and like that it does do that. It goes, oh yeah, you can shoot people in this game, but you mostly won't.
Yeah,
A
like,
few
yeah,
minutes later, you're like, I have 6 bullets.
The combat says so much about everything going on in this game, like especially with Joel. Like we keep coming back to like Joel's the bad guy, but I think combat speaks to that more than anything else, because I mean, you have Joel whose superpower is to sit down and listen for the enemy. That's also what the clickers do.
Yeah.
So there's that analog there. But the entire time, what stuck out as most interesting to me in combat is that in most scenarios with humans, 99% of the time when you encounter people, you have to kill them.
Yeah.
99% of the time when you encounter clickers, you don't have to kill them. So you can leave the dead things alive, and you most of the time have to kill the things
Yeah.
who are alive.
Yeah, and
that just
actually-
kind of speaks to who Joel is.
The first 2 hours I played the game, I was like, I'm not going to shoot anyone. I'm not going to shank anybody. I'm
Yeah.
going to sneak past them, or I'm going to strangle them.
Yep.
But you get in a couple situations where it's just like, oh, I'm killing you.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
you can't be a good guy in this world. There's nothing you can do to be like,
Yep.
I'm going to do a perfect playthrough. Like, there's games you
No,
can play as
you
just
get
a stealth
desperate.
guy. Yeah, you have to. There's just things you have to do.
And there was I really felt, I was talking to Greg about this when Greg and I were the only ones that had the game. I didn't want to spoil anything for anyone when we had it at that time. And I told Greg that one of the things that really resonated with me about the combat was that I felt like real palpable disappointment when I was seen. I wanted,
yeah.
not because I couldn't protect myself. Like, you can handle yourself. Playing the game on normal is really not that hard. It's just like I wanted to get through areas without being seen, and it was always disappointing when you're seen. And I think the game is somewhat forgiving in the sense that one of the immersion problems people have with the game, which I think is one of the game's only true flaws, that you kind of overlook because the game's just so good and it tells you such a riveting story and it's so fun to play, is the fact that they kind of let you out when your AI character is seen by someone else. They don't count that.
Yeah, that
and I
happens
know
a lot.
And I know that people are disappointed in that, but like, there's only 2 ways around that specific problem. It's either you let Ellie or whoever you're with blow your cover all the time, which would piss you off. And probably make the game much less fun to play, or you have like a vapid or non-existent.
You stay here,
Resident Evil-
Ellie. I'm gonna go
Yeah.
clean it up.
or like a
Well,
Resident Evil
that's-
5 style, like useless AI character. with
Actually,
you.
no, it's funny you say that, because Resident Evil 4 had an amazing bit like that where you could basically
Stay
be
here.
like, wait, hide in
Okay,
this
come
thing.
on, come on.
Stay behind here. I'm going to go clear this area out and make
Yeah.
it safe for you. And I was actually kind of surprised that there was no... all your interaction with her was scripted. There was nothing like, hey, Ellie, wait behind. I have to go kill these 5 people. I don't want you to see this. I don't want you standing in the middle being like, hey, look what I found. And just being like, just stay. Just relax for a minute. Or, all right, come on. You can come now. It's clear.
But isn't part of that you want, like, her whole character is that, we talked about this in Beyond when somebody said that she was naive, and we're like, no, she's not. Like, she's totally
Right.
raised in this world. She understands the violence and what's happening. And
Yep.
she does have those moments of, hey, whole brick to the head. you
Yeah,
know?
Yeah.
and in an ideal, perfect gameplay world, then yes, all of that would be fleshed out.
Sure.
But there were times where you're like, all right, I'm hiding. And she'd be like, me too! And run behind you, and 4 people would be like,
Right.
not do anything to you.
See, that for me, I didn't like Resident Evil 4's like, wait here, do this. It's like, you are a nuisance, and I don't enjoy playing with you. Like, get in the dumpster, and I will come back for you in 30 minutes. Is
Yeah,
what
and
it was.
I will say that the smart thing about that is that if anybody ever writes lists of the best escort missions in games,
Who does
the last,
that?
Write it down, Brian.
The Last of Us won't be in there because it never really felt like that. Like
Right.
it always just felt like this is an extension of my character.
The only thing we talked about being a breaking of
Exactly,
like, wait
exactly.
a
Here we go.
second, we've been together a year and I haven't taught you to swim.
Yeah,
Right?
You don't have school. You don't have to go to work. You don't have to do anything. You just hang out with me. We hang out in your bodies of water all the time. I put you on these shipping pallets that
Which
drag
don't
you
float.
around,
They
which don't
don't.
float. And she can't swim. And a year later, it's like season after season. And I get winter because that's cold. But season after season, it's like Ellie can't swim.
It didn't get to me until the final one on the lead up to the hospital where she's like, can you get the paddle? I'm like, wait a second.
Like, come on.
Like, what have we been
It's
doing?
the only thing you have to do.
Kick your legs.
I told Brian, I was like, I would understand it if she was like, it's a phobia where she has this irrational fear. She's
Right.
like, I can't. But it's like, she's like, no, I never really learned.
Yeah.
Fucking learn.
He's like, I'm not really into that. I made a Molotov, though. Is that what kids do? I don't know. It's crazy.
That kind of never really bothered me. I mean, considering we don't know what they went through in between those times where we see them, like together, because there's all of this 99% of their time together we don't see. You don't really, and if it's anything like the times we do see, there's not a lot of time for swimming lessons. You know what I mean? Like they're
There's
in trouble.
plenty of
Except for
time
all the
for-
times
there's
when
time.
you get to the water and just hang out in the water.
Yeah.
But you're
for as
going
long as you
somewhere. You're
want.
trying to go somewhere. I mean, you don't know. Like
There's
15
literally-
minutes, Colin. She's an adult.
Your watch is broken. You have no concept of time. You literally have no concept of time other than it's light, it's dark. We should sleep or we should walk. And part of the walking stuff should involve swimming.
It's fair. So what do we think about the specific scene, really one of the most powerful scenes in the game, when it looks like Joel's dead? Because when they're at the school and Joel falls onto onto the skewer, as it were, and I could have sworn at that point that Joel was going to die.
I was convinced he was dead, right? Because he falls on it, and it's like, that's a gaping wound. He is bleeding everywhere. This is not good. It cuts to Winter, and Ellie is alone. And I was like, oh my God, they did it. And I was almost a little bit disappointed when she has the voice crack and is like, antibiotics, give me antibiotics, I need medicine. I was like,
For me,
Joel's alive.
Yeah, it was total classic video game or movie these days where he fell, got skewered, and I'm like, oh, he's not dead. I've seen trailers where in outfits I haven't seen yet.
Right.
And so then, sure enough, I was like, when it happened and I started playing as Ellie, I was like, this would have been fucking awesome if I just kept on going as her. I really would have dug that. But
That's what I was hoping.
I really
for.
thought that
Yeah.
that's what happened too. And I thought that the scene between, like, you see the monkeys, there's that whole fight. By the way, the college dorms in that game looked like real college dorms.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
They
really
hadn't been hit by the apocalypse yet. They were just like, oh, messy potheads live here. It's like a hungry man on the floor. There's a monkey. There's a bong and all these 420 posters and stuff like that. So you see all that happen, and then he falls. The pole goes through him, and then she's in the snow tracking the blood. And I thought that like 10 minutes right there was like 10 of my favorite minutes in anything in the history of this medium. Like, it was just so cool, just tracking that deer and just going from like, hey, we're together, we're bros for life, to, oh my God, I'm all alone, it's completely desolate, it's cold, and now I'm murdering things on my own. We're brilliant. I really thought that was it for him.
Yeah, I did too, and I was kind of hoping. I thought it was too. It was like we talk about in Uncharted, and especially in Uncharted 3, there's a moment where you think Sullivan's dead, right? And like he's not. And like that was their chance to do it. Like that was their chance to like make a bold decision.
Yeah.
And I thought that this was kind of Naughty Dog's way of saying like we're gonna make that decision now by killing the protagonist of our new series halfway through the first games. There's going to be more Last of Us games.
Yeah.
So but they didn't, and that was fine.
Well, they didn't because it's a video game at the end of the day, and the weird part is like part of me was sitting there going, oh man, I just leveled up your shotgun. Instead of like, oh man, the loss of life. I was like, well, I made it so you can hear farther. You should stay alive. I could have used those points on health.
And that was one of the cool things too that Greg pointed out. I didn't notice it on my first playthrough is that if you look at Ellie, like, because I immediately went to Ellie's stats. I'm like, what's going on here? Like, did they carry over somehow? They didn't.
She can only craft like half the things. Too.
Yeah, and that's really cool. And that she has her own stuff in her backpack, which is cool.
She had that blade that was basically just, it came with her.
Yeah,
but when you open her bag,
opened
she has a note from her mom. Her mom wrote her this letter that you can go and you read it, and you're talking about interactable things. You read it and you flip it over, and it's like, make me proud. And Ellie goes, I'm trying, Mom, every day, or something like that. And she's got like the toy
Totally
she
missed
tried
that.
to give, what's his face, Henry? No, Sam.
Bootleg Gobot.
Transformer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And she's like, I was so stupid.
That guy's dad was kind of a dick, by the way.
It was his brother.
Oh, it was his brother. It was like, he's like, can I just, no.
Yeah.
You can't have that. Also, I thought it was funny that when you go in the toy store,
Jack and Daxter the board game.
and Uncharted the board game, still on the shelves, covered in dust. Even the apocalypse.
Just like
People are not. So it's
Just
like
like they
Uncharted
would-
board game. Jeez, I wouldn't
Abandoned
play that
and-
if it was the end of the
Exactly.
world.
Then what was it? It was Panda Adventure too.
Yeah.
Like, is there a next game? And while we're on Easter eggs, I loved the stuffed animals. They had a stuffed
Yeah.
Jack and Daxter
Oh,
on
yeah,
the
yeah, they were
dresser,
really
and then
cool.
a Nathan Drake in the bed. I was like, that's
They were really cool. They were almost like Sackboy-ish. They were
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like,
yeah.
Yeah, so we didn't touch on these other characters, Sam and Henry. They kind of pissed me off a little bit. I think that scene, like, in a sense, like they were fine with it as like a person, like experiencing Joel's and Ellie's story, like that betrayal specifically when
Right, when they
they
don't help
abandoned
you,
him.
yeah.
Yeah, and I was really mad that like
That they were so okay with it later.
Yeah, like that. Like
Yeah.
Joel takes the vengeful route every time, right? Except for there when like it most seriously affected him.
I agreed with that decision. Like, you know what I mean? Like especially when he's like, he gets the punch in. And he's like, "What would you have done with her?" And it's like, "Yep, I would have totally cut and run." And you guys, I don't know at all. Like,
And at
that
the same
makes
time,
100%
they
sense.
still realize like we can still help each other. Like that was a fucked up thing you did, but we still need each other.
They only knew each other for a few hours.
Sure.
And it was sort of like the guy, they kind of cut and ran at the first chance they got. Like, they're like, help us on this truck. Nope. And they ran off. And it's like, well, those guys are dicks. What do we expect?
The machine gun tank thing coming down. There's how are you going to get him, too? There's no, hold my legs, little brother. No, you're going to fall over, too, and be screwed.
And what do you think about I guess the other major plot point we ignored was the dam and how Joel's brother is still alive.
Yeah.
And that character kind of transcends the intro when he's really protecting Sarah and Joel all the way to this point, and is still alive at the end of the game.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that whole thing? Do you think that then they're back at that point in Colorado at the end of the game? So do you think that he's going to play into a possible sequel? Do you think that character and those guys are somehow important to the story?
I thought it was very important that they did not kill Tommy, not for like sequel purposes or anything, but because as soon as I arrived at the dam and I was like, oh, Tommy's going to be here, and as soon as I met him and his wife, I thought, okay, well, this is where it does the thing that all video games and apocalypse things do, where it's like, hope you don't like these people because we're going to kill them.
Yeah.
And they don't. Like, that's the one time in the game where you're thinking they're dead and they don't die. Everywhere else, you're absolutely convinced everyone's going to die, and they do.
I didn't know they were going to kill the shit out of that horse. Because they killed the shit out of that horse.
Yes, they did.
Like, he did like 8 flips and landed on his neck.
His brains exploded all over the
it was
gross.
Oh, it was really bad. Because they're like, shoot the horse. Don't shoot the horse.
Those guys have terrible aim during that scene. It's like,
Oh, yeah, they were stormtroopers.
It was,
Yep.
I was really surprised Joel and Ellie didn't die. One of them. I
Yeah,
thought
me
one
too.
of them
Me
would
too.
die
Me
by the
too.
time credits rolled.
And that's what I was saying when everyone was getting upset, especially in IGN comments about like, oh, these spoilers and stuff. Like, none of these spoilers are real.
Yeah, none of those are real.
You know, like that was what was so frustrating.
What
to me.
were they? Because I remember something about R.I.P. Ellie being one
Yeah,
of them,
one of them
right?
was that Ellie, like, so some of them were half true. Like, Ellie is infected at the
Infected.
beginning of the game. Well, Ellie is already infected at the beginning of the game. You don't see her get infected.
Accidentally read the art book and saw that spoiler.
I mean, that was one, we talked about this on Beyond, right, of the fact that a lot of these spoilers weren't true. And I said, well, part of them is, but we've been predicting that since the first, or second rewind.
Little girl
and
I care about, she's
and the
dead.
first time I got to play it, as soon as they get out of the quarantine zone, Tess and Joel have this conversation. Well, what if it's real this time? I want to believe. And it's like, well,
people
I wonder why we're carrying this girl around.
People have conditioned themselves to think that like you can't get emotional over something unless it's the worst thing that could possibly happen. Like I tweeted the other day that I choked up playing the game, and a bunch of people tweeted at me and they're like, "F you, man! Now I know somebody dies."
Nope.
I'm like, no, maybe there's just a giraffe. Like, you can never predict
Yeah,
that.
I think it's good. I think the most surprising thing about the game is that neither of them do die.
Yeah.
and
It's almost more powerful that
Yeah.
they survive for Joel to lie to her face.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think I'm telling you, like, I think it sets it up perfectly for a sequel because I understand Neil Druckmann doesn't want to do a sequel to the game, or at least they're on the record as saying that they
He
They'll
said he
leave those-
wouldn't mind.
yeah, like if they left it alone or whatever.
Yeah.
But there's no way the way this game is purportedly selling, it's like sold out in like
Sure.
every store. That Sony's not like we are doing a sequel and it's
Oh, yeah.
in pre-production right.
They've
at
got
this
the
very
Vita.
second.
They've got the Vita prequel, the card game.
Oh my
Nobody
God!
wants.
Can you imagine they put the Uncharted route? That would be cool to put a Last of Us.
Maybe it's the Uncharted board game from the story.
They'll almost definitely move away from those characters, I think. Even in DLC.
That's what I was saying.
I hope they
Beyond
don't.
the
I
other
hope
day.
what
really
ends
hope
up
they do.
happening is that you end up playing as Ellie in the
I would love to jump ahead. I would love 10
10
years
later with
10,
her.
10 year
The
jump.
thing is that then you're getting into like I don't want to like 'cause she's like that scene in the snow when she's hunting the deer is like very Tomb Raider like, right?
Yeah.
Like you're playing as a female character, an archer, a very strong woman or a girl at that time, whatever. I don't want like they're probably a little wary of doing that specifically because of how it might compare to the Tomb Raider reboot in some sense, where
Yeah.
it's like the strong female.
Oh, the one that
By the
ripped
time-
off Uncharted, you mean?
well,
After Uncharted ripped off Tomb
yeah, I was
Raider?
gonna say
They're
Uncharted-
back and forth
oh,
so
yeah,
bad
yeah.
now it doesn't even matter
But
anymore.
I'm
how do
just
you
saying,
think-
like, it's a post-apocalyptic as opposed to being
Sure.
an archaeologist. Of
I
course.
wonder if the Battlefield guys are like, I hope there's no gritty first-person shooters coming out this year.
I would have loved to seen the Naughty Dog's reaction to when the first demo of Tomb Raider and she gets impaled on that spike. Like, mother.
Damn it, we have that.
so.
And when he's kicking out the window in the beginning.
I want to
We
I want to
did
be at E3 like 2 or 3 years from now, and they're like, we have one more title to announce, and you just see Joel and Ellie, and they're years older, and they're running around the woods, and it says they kill someone, and it says
The Last of Us.
Yeah.
See, that's gonna piss me off so much. There's already so many jokes about the Lester or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like it doesn't mean they're the last. This
We
is
are the
yeah, I
last
know,
of
right?
us,
And nobody wants to
humanity.
get that. They all want to be a bunch of dicks on the internet like they always are.
Yeah, I mean, kind of the inevitability of the whole situation is that people are procreating. Obviously, Ellie was born after the fall of
Yeah.
society or whatever, but eventually the humanity will whittle down to nothing. I mean, that is kind of the unspoken thing in this game. They're not going to recover unless the Fireflies figure out a way to resist and make this cure, which is obviously aborted at the end. Is there anything else left unsaid, or should we get into questions?
I'm sure we're
the
gonna get into
questions.
stuff in the questions there. Remember, if you want to be part of the show, beyond at IGN.com.
So some of this we might have gone over, but let's just go over it again. I'm just going to read them. I haven't read. We'll see like where it brings us.
Blind.
Going blind.
Neil Gabriel.
Like a clicker.
Hi, Neil.
Neil says,
Shit, bro.
The Last of Us has options for no gore and things like that. Did you try playing the game with that option to see how it looked? I think that having that option is a great way to try and make the game more available to somewhat younger audience, but there's still violence.
What?
I don't
To
think
a
it's,
younger audience, the that is wrong with this game that will make you sad and offended is not the fucking blood.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't.
What? Yeah, what?
I didn't read it as this is in there for a younger audience. I read it as this is in there for the people who were all crybabies after last E3. Last E3 that ended, the demo ends with the shotgun to the head,
Yeah.
and so many people were up in arms of how
I mean, it
violent
wasn't
the
just that.
industry
There was a lot of like really gross stuff.
What do you do
happening
now?
in
You
the
throw a
game.
pie
But
in his
yes.
face? I mean, this is
No, well, his
I mean,
head
you
just
just shoot
doesn't
him and he just, like,
deteriorate
I
into
like
a
my
blood
gritty
mist.
post-apocalyptic virus outbreak worlds to be G-rated.
Well,
sir.
here's the
Thank
thing
you.
about like the violence. I feel like in this game, if you turn it off, sure, you don't have the violence, but everything else is still really fucked up. But I feel like the violence in this game has a lot to say.
Yeah.
It contributes a lot to the idea that this is a really bleak, disgusting world. Like,
Right.
if Joel has someone with a gun to their head and shoots them in the face, he is covered in blood for like the foreseeable future. Like, you see the ramifications in the world of what you've done. You see dudes who are like just gaping wounds.
What
in their
happens
chests
at this,
and shit.
when the thing goes through his chest? Does he land on a trampoline? And hurt
I don't
his
think it's
knee?
that drastic,
I
Ryan. I
there's
just
certain
think there's
things-
not blood
You
all
can take the
over.
blood out, but you'd be like, dude, that's weird. You have a pole through you and you're not bleeding.
It's on a trampoline.
He leans up against
That's
the
good
wall and no
stuff.
blood streams.
Omi asks, this specifically for Greg. He said, Greg, in an early episode of Podcast Beyond, you mentioned that someone at Naughty Dog clued you in on a few details you missed. What
Right.
were they?
It was the backpack that I then passed on to you. That I never looked in the backpack because that was it was Neil Druckmann. I beat it. I was talking to him about it. He's like, "Did you look in the backpack?"
Whose
and I'm
backpack?
like,
Joel's
"No,
or Ellie's?"
Ellie's." When
Okay,
you take
just
over as
Ellie's.
Ellie for the
Okay.
first time, like I looked in there for and I saw I couldn't do all the Molotovs. He's like, "No, the actual items." So I went back and looked through stuff like
That's
that.
awesome.
I'm sure there was other things.
That's
I believe
really
that's the
cool.
biggest one.
Yeah, that is cool. I want to get the platinum. I'm worrying about the multiplayer trophies right now. By the way, multiplayer is really, really good.
It's awesome. Connect it to your Facebook.
Let's we discussed this a little bit, but let's. Oh, I'm sorry.
Before we piggyback off,
Yeah.
can we talk about that a little bit? Platinum pace and stuff like that.
Sure.
We talked about this when on our initial no spoilers part on
This is
Beyond.
where you and I just tune out.
No, you're in part of this because you got involved on the internet, on the Twitter there about it.
Did I?
Yeah.
I already forgot.
What it was
Sorry, where?
I don't. I love The Last of Us. I don't plan on platinuming it. And when we played through the game, I never looked at the trophy list. And once I was done with it, and I went and looked at it, like I'm still not. I don't want to do that to this game. I feel like that cheapens what this is to me in
Yeah,
a way.
yeah.
Because like usually what I would do is finish it and then finish it. Like Uncharted, right? I'd finish it,
Yeah.
I'd finish it, I'd finish it. But Uncharted is such a game. Whereas for me, this was more of an experience.
world.
You
Yeah,
know
and
what I mean?
I'm told the trophies are kind of hard to get in this game.
There's also not
You
that
have to
many.
play it a lot, and then there's a lot.
Because I know I
playing for
played
multiplayer.
through it once. I got no trophies until the very end
Right.
when I had tears in my eyes and it was like, boop.
You can shut that off now at the new
I know.
firmware.
Well,
Yeah,
if the
if it
is the
doesn't brick
firmware
your
back up,
system.
if the firmware's not back.
The firmware, my sister's trying to be bricked when I go home.
But that yanked me out of the experience more than anything because I was like,
Right.
oh, that's right, it's a video game.
It's
Yeah.
fine. The credits were rolling. You were done.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kept
Written by
comparing it
Neil Druckmann pulled
to
you out, too.
Journey and Walking Dead, right? Because when those games came out, we talked about like you played Journey once and that was your playthrough, and a lot of people played Walking Dead once and that was their playthrough.
Yeah.
And if I had not reviewed Walking Dead, that's how I would have done it too. But for this is the same thing to me, even though the story is it's linear. You know what I mean? I'm going to get the same point. Part of that, what was so awesome about my Last of Us playthrough was not knowing the giraffe was around the corner and not
Yeah.
knowing what was going to happen exactly with David and like what's going to happen with these two brothers I'm with all of a sudden. You know?
Yeah, I had the same thing with Heavy Rain where I finished it and I was like, well, these guys are alive, these guys aren't. And then you did an article which fascinated me, which is all the different endings
Right.
and all the different ways it could go. And I was like, wow, Greg actually had to go and play all of that, which means that when he thinks of that game, his experience is like
It's
fractured off
fragmented,
into
yeah.
like 15 different places. And for me, it's just like, that's who made it, that's who didn't.
Yeah, I like
So-
that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally playing online right now. I think it's fun. I will platinum it. Yeah, the online's really, really fun. Matt asks, and we talked about this a little bit, but we can kind of just maybe make a guess, like a specific guess. What do you think the story DLC will cover? Joel and Ellie's story was resolved, but maybe ND, Naughty Dog, could show us the events that led up to Joel and Tommy separating, or even Joel just doing his, quote, job, smuggling, killing innocent people and
No
stuff.
prequels.
No prequels. Let's just go around. If you could, Greg, we'll start with you. If you could guess specifically what they're going to show in this DLC, what would it be?
If I'm making the guess, I think will actually happen. It'll be more Joel and Ellie, and San Francisco is actually a good thing. Like if they have extra environments or whatever, I don't think they're going to go through and like we were talking about different characters or this, that, or the other would tell Ishmael's story. I would love to see Ish's story, but I sincerely doubt they have the time. Desire to sink that much in when they already have these resources ready to go.
So that's my thing with like this and Bioshock Infinite. Both of them, I think, man, I would love to see totally other characters, but are they going to really like recast a new lead, or recast a new AI member? Because there's no way they're getting rid of that AI system because it's too good.
Right.
So are they going to redo it from the ground up?
Go
again?
back in for 3 or 4 hours of gameplay. Yeah.
Right. So I would like to see new people, but maybe they repurpose it. Maybe you do Sam and Henry because they're a duo. And
That's a good point.
Yeah. I like the dog idea, but I want to see Crazy Dave's Cannibal Restaurant, like Diner Dash style, and people are coming in. He's like, "Eat a dick."
Here at Crazy Dave's Cannibal Restaurant, when we say eat a dick, we mean it.
If I was going to bet,
Left at the gasoline shop.
if I was going to bet, I would say that we're going to see
Kids eat free.
We're going to see Joel and his brother right after the fall.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, maybe, who knows? Because we know that they had some sort of association with the Fireflies earlier.
Or Marlene and Ellie.
Yeah, sure. That'd be great too. There's a lot of opportunities. I'm sure it'll be nothing that we guessed.
Correct.
Let's do one more from our friend M Dog.
What up, M?
I trust him implicitly.
Me too. He says, we talked about this before, but we can elaborate on it a little bit. Do you think that Ellie believed Joel when he said that he had been truthful about the Fireflies? My friend and I discussed it, and her response, a very weak, perhaps doubtful, okay. Ellie's.
Look at M Dog talking to girls.
I think he's talking about Ellie.
Oh, dang.
Seemed to show otherwise. Another question: if you were put in Joel's shoes, would you have aborted Ellie's surgery, thus ruining all hope for a cure, or let it proceed? I found it ridiculous that Joel made that choice, but after reading other people's interpretation of his decision, I don't think that a cure could have saved mankind at this point. Anyway,
we all killed the doctor, so I think we would have.
Yeah.
you have to. I mean, you have to kill the doctor.
Yeah, no. If I could have not killed the doctor, I would have not. If I could have surrendered right there, I would have surrendered.
I didn't let him go at me. I didn't know that he went after you, but like I held my gun there for like 5 seconds, and I'm like, well.
Eventually, he
go.
picks up the scalpel and turns to you, and I'm like, well, you're raising arms at
So
me.
I love the way it ended. We all talked about that. I think if they do a sequel with these characters, the most like pivotally emotional moment in it will be when she confronts him about it, and he's just like,
Oh God,
"Look,
please no!
I'm-"
That's just like robbing everything about that ending.
Exactly. This is what I don't want. And this is why some people should just be happy with this is how it ended, and that's fine, and just walk away. And you don't get like answers to everything. And sometimes you just walk away from a conversation, and that was the last conversation you ever had about it, and that's it. And I think that's the way it should be. I don't want it to be like, hey, did you lie about the ending of that last game? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, I'm mad at you, and pounds on his chest. And he's like, I lost a daughter. Look at the watch. And it just, it steals everything that made this so powerful to me. So I'm really hoping that doesn't happen.
If they do the sequel and they keep these characters and they don't go off it with different people or whatever, the way I see it happening is never another conversation between them about it. It'll be a third party enters who was a guard a guard who got shot or something, or just he's an urban legend now, right? Like the guy who ruined all of humanity's chance. Like people would have talked about this. I'm sure not every Firefly was like, not just going to be up tonight for no reason at the base. You know what I mean? There's other Fireflies like in camp somewhere that were like part of this, knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, it reminded me of when you read stories about like research facilities that people break into and destroy and wreck years of, and like it's angry vegans or somebody that thinks that they're doing animal testing or something like that. And whatever you feel about all that, the result is that somebody was working on something for so long and then it stopped. And then it was destroyed and it was ended. So afterwards they're just like, we got to start from scratch.
Yeah.
So that's where society is, and if they want to trace that back to he's the guy, and there's this man running around the world that ruined the world for everybody. And spoilers, he's with the girl that they could have saved the world. Like they're a pretty easy target to find because it's them and a couple other people who are eating people, and then clickers and bloaters, and a giraffe. That's a society. Actually, side note, I was really happy when they sort of stopped the monster closet with bloater. And it wasn't just like, here's this thing. And
we got a puker and a flyer and a...
it's just like, a guy comes in with wings. He's like, I'm infected. Screw. I'm glad they didn't do any of that.
Yeah, me too.
When you have that first fight against the bloater, it feels really special. And then they only happen a few more times throughout the game.
Yeah, you can ignore a fight with one entirely if you're just like, God, open the fucking door.
Yeah, you can mostly just get around them. And he's just standing there and he's like, and you're like, But I'm glad that they didn't turn it into a whole like, here's a species, we're working on an action figure line.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like that would have totally destroyed it for me.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
tasteful, I thought.
Yeah.
Anything else left unsaid, Greg?
I like this game.
Yeah.
It was really good.
Yeah, I think it's, like I said in the review, I think it's PlayStation 3's best exclusive. And of course, I don't say best game because it's in the conversation, I think, for like best
sure.
game I played this generation, like no doubt about it.
yeah.
But we're bringing in Red Dead and Fallout 3 and games that are like really, and this game is in that class.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think as far as the exclusive offerings on PS3, as good as many of them are,
This
is the best
will
one.
be my IGN Game of the Year pick, assuming nothing completely out of nowhere comes this fall that shocks the out of me. But
Yeah, I mean,
this is the game to beat for me right now. And I was saying on Beyond yesterday, which you guys should listen to.
Every Tuesday on IGN.com and iTunes, it's the #1 PlayStation podcast on the internet.
you got that down.
Yeah, I say it quite a bit.
It feels this is like the PlayStation's Ocarina of Time to me, which is a weird thing to say because it's like they are stylistically completely different.
But it's the most like meaningful end of the
Yeah.
console. Like here's like
Yeah,
our
it's
magnum
like
opus.
this is the thing that defines this generation for me. This is the one that as years go by, I'll probably like once every year or so I will play it again.
Yeah.
So this one's going to be re-released to death on every PlayStation
yes.
platform
It'll
and
be on
handheld.
Vita.
Hey, I
2
mean, if
in
they want to
2
put this
years.
out in a few years with new PS4 textures, yes, I will play it.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
I have
man.
no problem with that. If
That'd
they
be
want to do an
great.
HD remaster,
Game's
of
already
this
beautiful,
game,
yeah.
Yeah. So
Cool. Mitch?
Yeah, I mean, when I finished this game, I thought, you know what, that was a one and done experience. I don't really need to replay it. Don't really care about multiplayer. Still playing multiplayer. I've started my new game on hard. I can't get enough. And I, at a certain point, thought in fall, maybe a little bit too much combat. I don't know how I feel about this. I feel like it's falling back on guns too much. But even then, like the combat is so excellent that at a certain point I stopped caring, even if I did feel like some of it was padded. Love it.
Altana? Closing thoughts?
I hope she learns to swim. That would be nice. No, like I mean, it's everything I just said. It's a fantastic game. The fact that we can all sit here and we're not debating over like really dumb
Was
things
it
about
really a
like,
10, Colin?
I
Like,
wish you had more inventory items. Like,
Right,
it's just
right.
like that was a fucking incredible experience that
Yep.
I never would have thought growing up, like playing Zelda and Mario on my NES, that this is where we'd be right now. But this is where we are, and we're getting closer and closer to kind of intruding on territories of books and movies where people can really start taking this medium seriously. And yeah, it's full of murder, but so is everything else.
Yeah.
And I've never experienced anything like it in a game, and I just want more.
Cool, fair enough. I agree. Excellent game. Buy it, play it, enjoy it. Thank you for joining us on this special Spoilercast for The Last of Us branded Podcast Beyond, as you can see. As Greg said, come listen to Podcast Beyond on IGN or iTunes. Every Tuesday we have a new episode. Episode 300 is coming up soon, Greg.
Yeah,
So it's very exciting.
live event.
All right, until next time, Beyond.
Beyond.
Beyond.